Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. I am on Odyssey, I'm on YouTube, and I'm also on Facebook Live tonight. It's around 11 o'clock, that is, p.m., that is, here on the Eastern Coast. The day being the third day of February 2023. So what I'm going to be doing is sharing, this is pretty much the last part of the book of communitarianism, anti-communitarianism that Nikki Raapana wrote many years ago. As far as I know, as far as I've seen, what I've researched here, it's the Bible that is dealing with communitarianism and how quickly it has spread the last 30 years in our country, and how the United States is giving up its sovereignty to the United Nations, you see. So we're going to read some information here, and hopefully you will get active, because I think this is a very important issue in our lifetime, folks. Because at this point, as you are seeing all kinds of changes now, they're all over the place, and it's not good. It's not good, folks. It really isn't. I saw some photos, someone who took pictures of the place in New Orleans. You're seeing the change, because what happened was you used to see heroes that was in either the American Revolution that took place here in 1776, that is the leaders of certain groups. Then you also saw what I call even Confederate generals here in the South. Those are all been taken down, just about all of them now. History is being covered up. This is what's happening. This is part of communitarianism, you see. They're going to destroy the so-called leaders or heroes of our past. And you can beg to say that some of them are bad, good, whatever. That's not the point. If you erase history with a country, you already then include what I would call beginning to teach children a different history, you see. And that's what we're starting to see. So let's get into this particular book, Anti-Communitarianism by Nikki Raapana. So she goes to the first section here. She's going to be dealing with what I call communitarian buzzwords. In section 2 will be what they call COPS, capital COPS, timeline from 1991 to 2010. 3 is public disclosure requests. 4 is neighborhood surveys. 5, how to root out local agenda 21. 6, question for political candidates. 7, 3 easy steps to world government. 8, international policy studies. And the last section here is going to be Big Mother's Double Tongue Dictionary. So some of the communitarian buzzwords are sustainable anything. That's the word. It's not about like we sustainable gardens, sustainable this, that, da, da, da. And what that means simply is a change and a transformation. And you have to understand simply is they're throwing out what they call the old here, what has been reliable for over 200 some years. They basically have put us to sleep. So what I'm going to share with you, like I said, this is one of the major words. You hear it all over the place. Sustainable energy, sustainable gardens, sustainable, it's all, but it's meant to change and then transform. The next one is animal or earth rights, and that means human rights / assets. Goals larger than self, that's the asset-based development. Here's another one that people talk about. You hear this all over the place. In fact, people just say it. They don't even realize it, what they're saying. As above, so below. Part of it, what we think it is to do with what, to move in a positive, positive situation. But it's showing simply social justice. You see how they distort these things? Balance and balancing means justice or important values. But it's not about justice for all of us. It's going to be justice for only the few. That is, the next one will be called values or best use. That is livability, health, and safety. Democratic process, microcosm and macrocosm. Citizen participation means privacy to transformation. But they don't really want, all they want is to get you involved like it's something grand. And they just quote unquote, it's like a big ad here. This is what we got for you. In reality, it's going to control you, you see. Citizens' responsibility is a new citizen responsibility is a new sense of commitment. Civil society values equals new sense of volunteerism. You'll be doing this, folks, but in reality, you'll be actually destroying your own country. And they're buying into what I call the young people in this whole deal because they don't have any foundation, you see. Food security means food sovereignty. But yet you look around you right now, folks, and look how much the food system is collapsing around us. Do you see it? You want to see it? Protecting the future, sustainable communities, climate change, you see, action, meaning environmental stewardship. Well, they're the ones who have actually destroyed this planet, folks. It's not us. They've created things that used to be what we call glass containers. Now it's all plastic. So something like this, at one time, you know, it could be it's glass. But we've gone for their tricks, folks. We've gone for the tricks. Community building, rights and responsibilities. Yeah, you'll be a slave in the system, folks. That's what you're going to be. Community rights, quality of life / ethics. We already have ethics, folks. Mainly simply is do unto others as we like to be treated. Rules by consensus. It means crime prevention, they're saying. Civil organizations, stakeholder councils. Economic engines / safety means green tech. See, green tech is the future, you see. Electric cars. You see, they're not worth 2 cents. They're all being, you see what this whole thing's about? They're controlling you. You won't be able to go anywhere, you see. You won't be able to go and have freedom in your cars. And it's again, another word is sustainability again. Because see, we're running out of quote unquote sources. We're running out of oil. We're running out of gas. We're running out of coal. When that's all bullshit, folks. It's for them to control us. They've lied to us over and over and over again. You've got to stop believing these clowns. Principles and aesthetics of sustainable design. So you can't build something that them, it's got to be fashionable. And then the last part here is full-blown fear equals terror and terrorism. So it goes into section 2 here, and this is what they call the community-oriented policing services. It's called COPS, capital COPS, timeline from 1991 to 2010. Don't ever ask this is what, if you have an issue, don't ask the police to get involved in your community or your neighborhood, folks. You're opening the door for them to control you and come in here and be a part of your subdivision or whatever neighborhood you're in. With that, you see. So in 1991, Amita, A-M-I-T-A-I, at Tanzania, established the Communitarian Network and the Institution for Communitarian Policy Studies at George Washington University. Of all schools to go to, he chose to go, and he's actually teaching this. He's still alive. He's 94 years old. He is involved in this. He's been involved with the several presidents, beginning to push this stuff actually during the Carter administration, also under not only Carter, but also with the Reagan presidency. 1992, UN adopts Local Agenda 21 program for achieving global sustainable development goals by the 21st century. One mandate for achieving sustainability is a database of local assets. President Bush, that is senior, signs it. Now, wait a minute, folks. He signs a UN deal here. So he's already committed treason. And then a team of U.S. congressmen in their official capacity as representatives of American voters attend the summit. That is, the U.S. Congress passes a concurrent resolution, not a law, not a, it's a resolution to become a lead agent and partner with the Agenda 21 program for global sustainable development. What is going on here? You see, 1993, U.S. President Clinton establishes the President Councils on Sustainable Development, PCSD. Within months, every federal agency, repeat, every federal agency changes their mission statement to include sustainable development goals. This aligns the U.S. federal agency with the UN. Do you understand this is a coup? Do you understand what's going on here, folks? This is a coup. This is a coup. No one knows even what's going on here. The President Clinton, which should be tried for treason here, establishes the presidential candidates. Establishes the President Council on Sustainable Development. Within months, every federal agency changes their mission statement to include sustainable development goals. So that's what they're doing right now. They're no longer following the Constitution. These people are traitors. This aligns U.S. federal agencies with the UN. UN is already the power here in the United States, and it's in the Western world. It is a coup. That's what's happened. U.S. Congress in 1994 passes the revised Violent Crime Act, which establishes a need to create a communitarian police force, as per Estefania advice. So we're listening to one man here who is a Jew. Who is a Jew? You see? And we've forgotten all about our Constitution. Which, in fact, if these people wanted to pass this thing, this is correct. If you want to pass it correctly, then you do amendments and you pass it. 3/4 of the states have to amend it. They don't do that, folks. They don't do that anymore. They bypass the Constitution. These people are really bad news, folks. In 1995, U.S. Congress passes the Domestic Violence Act, which establishes a greater purpose for communitarian police force, based on resolutions made at the United Nations Women's Conference in Beijing. So we have a selected people go to a conference place in either Brazil or in Beijing or elsewhere, and suddenly come back and give us rave reviews, but they never tell us the real truth, what's going on, you see. And suddenly our Congress passes the Domestic Violence Act, which establishes a greater purpose for communitarian police force. That's in 1995. In 1997, this is all still under the Clinton administration, U.S. Office of Community Policing designs COP programs that bypass the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. A GIS database program is tested by HUD on people with problems in urban ghettos. So they're stigmatizing you and putting you as becoming a problem. 1998, still Clinton is still in office. DOJ and DOD merge technology and information and define soldiers and American cops as doing basically the same job now. Do you understand that? This is why the cops these days are brutal, because they're former army soldiers. And so we have hired these people who actually, instead of actually calming a situation down, they have actually heightened the situation up and threatened people. They completely have been brainwashed. Soldiers, because they fight wars, see, but this is not, we're not in a war zone here, folks. This is our country. Continue, 1999, COPS assigned, that is capital COPS, assigned to Seattle Police Department, begins assisting city planners with designing new land use and private home regulations. The DOJ/COPS build community mapping, planning, and analysis for safety strategies called COMPASS, COMPASS. This database program helps community developments and COPS implement LA21. Agenda 21 projects, you see. In 2000, communitarians designed plans for gathering and computer mapping of local community human assets. A gentleman named Gil, G-I-L, Kerlikowske, spelled Kerlikowske, Director of COPS Grants, approved Seattle grant application to test COMPASS. Kerlikowske, chosen to become the next Seattle police chief, was Norm Stamper, S-T-A-M-P-E-R. So this is happening under the Bush administration. So 2001, U.S. Pentagon creates a national database called DARPA, D-A-R-P-A. 2002, U.S. Congress approves an Office of Homeland Security based upon what took place at the quote-unquote Twin Towers, World Trade Center, which reality is our military stood down when this happened, folks, if it was a real deal. They never did anything. They stood down if this was a foreign attack, or was it a self-inflicting wound? So again, they absorbed 22 federal agencies, including the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, and COPS. They put it all together under their deal here. It's all under the Office of Homeland Defense. It's no longer, the Justice Department is no longer a separate entity here. It's been put in to a massive groups here of 22 federal agencies, one being Department of Defense. Why would a Department of Defense and Department of Justice be under one? Why would they be put all in one? I'm sure the Department of Energy is in that deal. I'm sure others, Department of Agriculture, you see. Let's continue. 2004, still under the Bush administration, W's rule, digital photos and database connected to state DMBs after state flunk security tests given by Esazani and the Communitarian Network. That is the JINSA law enforcement exchange program called LEAP, L-E-E-P, renewed program for training American cops to, hear me, American cops in anti-terrorism tactics in Israel. Do you see what's going on here? America is being changed, folks. And we got someone here speaking the truth to us and warning us. In 2005, U.S. President Bush defends his right to spy on U.S. state citizens. This was a renewal of the Patriot Act. In 2009, when President Obama took place, Kerlikowske is now appointed President Obama's drug czar. It's interesting they use that word czar, isn't it? Don't you think that's funny? That's not an American word, is it? No, it's not. It comes from Russia, folks. So his name is Kerlikowske. 2010, still now under the Obama administration, American police began using fusion centers, F-U-S-I-O-N centers, C-E-N-T-R-S. Unfortunately, that's as far as I know, simply is what she shared, because simply is she hasn't updated any of that information as far as I know of. That is Nikki Raapana. How many things have happened since then, folks? It's been 13 years, 12 years already. 3, public disclosure requests. The 1974 Freedom of Information Act, called the FOIA, gave Americans a right to obtain and copy any government documents. The FOIA is the best tool we have for getting information at the federal level. Many states also have a Public Disclosure Act or something similar. Call your local city clerk and ask. Remember to always be polite and friendly. Clerks and receptionists can be very helpful and knowledgeable and are the greatest asset to your quest. However, expect to run around in general, though. Elected officials and their office don't particularly want the public to know that we can purchase copies of government documents such as detailed financial statements, department mission statements, training manuals, budgets, agendas, and meeting notes. American public officials don't have to create documents, answer questions, or explain their actions or statements, but they are required to respond to requests for existing documents. And there's a sample letter. Dear so-and-so, that is the agency official name, please provide the following documents. I'm looking for information on the local community oriental policing service, COPS grants. I want to know the federal community oriental policing services, that is the COP grants, my personal information held in local database, that is the COMPAS files, community mapping data gathering programs, public school records, state driver's license, local neighborhood association records, and Department of Construction and Land Use, public health, and any assets basic community development files. 4, public/private partnerships and development contracts. That's the PPP. 5, meeting notes regarding startup of local visioning, VISIONING. 6, local weed and seed programs and grants. 7, every database level in community development maps. When writing to the Freedom of Information Act or public disclosure request, be sure to cite every law you have at the very top. Public officials have an exact time frame for answering requests. Once they respond to your request, you can call and set up an appointment to visit and review the documents they have produced based on what you take. You can request more specific documents that are referred to in earlier documents. If they refuse to provide anything you request, you can sue them under your law. I'll say that again. If they refuse to provide anything you request, you can sue them under your law. The old Watergate adage, follow the money, will no doubt lead you to hidden deals made between your local governments and development firms. There's a lot of money in the development game, you see. The closer you get to laws and agreements that break constitutional laws designed to protect individual rights, the harder it will be to get financial information. When it gets rough, when it gets really tough, you're getting close, you see. What we can learn from the filing of the public disclosure requests. The COPS is a communitarian theory manifested by the DOJ in 1994 in the U.S. and worldwide, promoted as a friendlier branch of the Seattle Police Department. It was the lead federal agency involved at every level of Agenda 21 pilot tests in Seattle. Vast resources became available to cities who hired COPS naturally from generous grants and the millions of military hardware/technology left over from the Cold War. The CSO, that is Community Service Officers, serve on Planning and Action Committee. The CSO, that is Cindy Grannard, CINDYGRNARD, suggested changes to constitutional grounded property and privacy laws that were identified as barriers to implement Local Agenda 21 in Seattle. She's talking about her time when she's there at Seattle herself, that is Nikki Raapana. Housing and Urban Development used the dialectic Creating Safe Streets initiative to promote the idea that Americans were filled with full-blown fear. Dangerous HUD project served as humanitarian pilot test long before COPS was even established, especially by Congress. Weed and Seed, Knock and Talks, Hotspots, and SARA, S-A-R-A, were tested in the Seattle project early as 1971. Next section. Community mapping and planning and analysis for safety strategies. That is COMPAS, was a federal HUD/COPS data gathering system designed by Gil Kikogas, then Director of Grants for Washington, D.C. Office of Community-Oriented Policing Service, spring of 2000. He became the Seattle Police Chief, that is. The COMPAS grants came in under the Department of Neighborhoods in 1999, authorized by Kikogas, but was moved to Seattle Strategic Planning Office in 2000. COMPAS morphed into fusion centers after September 11, 2001. In 2008, Kikogas was appointed President Barack Obama's drug czar. King County Department of Public Health, that's again in Seattle, provided the expert opinions used to obtain municipal court level inspections warrants for suspicion of harboring rats and bugs. Are you kidding me? That were used to gain quasi-legal inside assets to private homes in the Roosevelt neighborhood. 13 residence renters were detained by SWAT cops for over 2 hours. Health inspectors abandoned the search after cops expanded their scope of the help warrant and took over the search without a criminal warrant, as is a required response under state and federal constitutional law. See how they're breaking the laws here, folks? Another department, Department of Design and Construction and Land Use, was the lead municipal agency involved in every level of Agenda 21 pilot test in Seattle. The DCLU director, Rick Contentious, I'll spell that to you, Krchellis, served at the same time on the board for Sustainable Seattle, a non-governmental organization, you see, NGO, purchased the Design Roosevelt Dog and Pony Show, and also presented at the United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. The Department of Neighborhoods, DON, was created to locally implement UN LA21 in Seattle. Under this department, Tamara Roosevelt, that is Roosevelt's Neighborhood Association, Neighborhood Action Team, Seattle, Rooming and Boarding House Committee, and 38 new neighborhood plans. Constitutionally, guidelines set forth in the Washington Growth Management Act of 1990 were somehow overlooked. Seattle Police and the DOJ cops worked on every DON committee level. Sometimes it's plainclothes cops posing as volunteers. SPD officer Michelle Crooks kept files on residents claiming to be living in R&B houses. We have asked to see our NAT files for 3 years. The city denied them. They had them. The NAT director, Veronica Jackson, turned the NAT files on private citizens in the Roosevelt pilot test over to Compass in early 2000. The Seattle City, now this is what's going on. There are people who are doing this, folks. There truly are traitors to your country and who you are. Seattle City Attorney Office, City Attorney Mark Sidram, S-I-D-R-A-N, handled the legal end of the planning assets or process by going after bad landlords and advised tomorrow's Roosevelt, the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association, that is the DON/NATS/R&B, Assistant City Attorney Trish Nelamo, assisted with the Department of Neighborhood Action Teams, the R&B Committee, Seattle Noise Ordinance revisions, new mandatory home inspections, and interdepartmental cross-training, the primary goal being teaching all city agencies with access to private dwellings to report all life-threatening things into the Compass database. The Compass GIS software was available through HUD. It was called Community 2020. Citizen Service Bureau, officially designed as an ombudsman for citizen complaint over city policies. Director Susan Cobble refused to take our citizens' complaint because we were complaining on behalf of our landlord and his 100+ tenants. Susan Cobble, C-O-B-L-E, reported directly to then Seattle Mayor Paul Schell, S-C-H-E-L-L, on the R&B progress, as she was an active member of the NATS R&B committee involved in planning the Dawson raid on 9/30, that is the 9th month, 30th, 99. The next section is the neighborhood surveys. Every local visioning group in America right now is claiming that their community vision for the future represents what the community wants and needs. Our experience with the visioning process is that barely 5% of the neighborhood residents ever know anything about what is going on at local planning and zoning meetings, since all the plans include periodical surveys that gauge the attitudes and values of community residents. We see this as a very effective tool, you see. A survey can prove exactly how many people have ever heard of their own local comprehensive plan. A simple survey would be to ask just one question: what have you heard about the Anchorage 2020 comprehensive plan? She's in Anchorage at that time. The result of these surveys can be presented during public hearings, which makes them part of public record. Imagine how powerful it would be to be able to present a survey that shows less than 2% of local residents are even aware of the community plan. These are traitors, folks. They've come into the gates and they're undermining our freedom. Continue. National surveys are often based on only 500 random responses. You got that. 500 people in your community to take your survey. You got some credible statistics to prove that local planning actions do not accurately reflect the vision of an informed public. Once you have statistics to prove your neighbors are completely out of the loop, the next logical step is to prepare a county or statewide initiative to recall the plan. Americans have the right to bring a people's initiative before the registered voters if they can get enough voters to sign a petition. You may want to do the survey and petition at the same time, or use your results to prepare a paper trail that leads to a people's referendum. American voters ultimately still have the power to overturn any unconstitutional laws, programs, or plans. In many areas of the country, communitarian law firms such as the 1,000 Friends of Washington or the 1,000 Friends of Oregon, etc., are trying to stop people from being able to bring initiative before the voters. If that doesn't tell you it's a red flag, what else would it be, folks? These people are making money to, in fact, to cage you up. They know it's one of the most powerful tools free people have. The initiative process is under attack around the country. Use it before it's gone. Next section is how to root out, that is the local Agenda 21. Ask the most obvious, seemingly stupid questions. Sometimes it's the dumbest ones that seem to stump the 2020 visionaries. Get a copy of your local land management plan or comprehensive plan. Find someone to read the whole thing. If it's too long, just focus on the vision for the future. Chart the steps they are taking to achieve sustainable growth in your community. Identify all the terms you are unfamiliar with, anything that you thought you knew but may have ambiguous interpretations. Find the lead agencies who are implementing your plan. Find out who wrote it and who funded it. Many areas have community and economic development agencies. There are usually a number of professional facilitators, that's who these people are, and advisors leading local planning meetings. They will always claim their vision represents what the community wants. File a Freedom of Information Act / public disclosure request for every definition they use as justification. Ask for copies for agreements and contracts between local government agencies and private businesses. Ask to review copies of government contracts for public / private partnership. Use the information that you get from your first round of requests to write your next round of requests. It can be like pulling teeth with some agencies you see. Ask to review all community development grants. That is the grants. Request any government document that may identify what you want to know about your plan. Don't limit yourself to published documents you see. You have a right to see their emails and meeting notes. Officials in the United States have no right to privacy unless it is a real security issue. Keep records as you are building a case against them. 6. Questions for political candidates. Does your candidate embrace communitarian values? Do they support sustainable community economic development and public control of private property? How can you find out when your local news reporters never seem to ask any deep questions about candidate affiliations when they never do? They're just stupid idiots, you see. They just want a job. Sorry, I just got to say it. The best way to find out anything is to ask the candidate yourself. Even non-answers tell us a lot about the person's character and morality. Yeah, it means he doesn't care. You don't want to vote for that clown. These sample questions can help everyone during public opinions to get some real information about their political candidates. Have you ever supported communitarian programs and laws? Do you object to legislation which violates the U.S. Constitution? Are you an advocate of sustainability and sustainable community economic development? Do you support Vision 2020 or any other similar Agenda 21 plan? Do you own property along any proposed local commerce, residential, or transit development project? Do you support the database of personal identification used in assets-based community development, licensing, and crime mapping, MAPPING? Will you vote to amend our government offices and laws with communitarian goals, commitments to sustainability, and revised visions and mission statements? Do you understand the difference between the idea of American citizenry, protected under constitutional law, and the communitarian idea of balanced democratic citizenship? Do you support mandatory volunteer programs? Is CAFTA the supreme law of the United States? Do you support diversity with unity or any other similar plan? Do you support our transformation to a more global society? 7, Section 7, 3 easy steps to world government. 1, the United Nations adopts a resolution to address habitats, that is, the environment, air, water, land, species, etc. 2, human rights, not to be confused with individual rights, folks. Human rights are not individual rights. Get it? That's a communist, that's a wordplay that people think it's about them. It is not about your individual rights at all. Next one, women, children, victims of war or disaster. 4, sustainable development and climate change. 5, social equity and free trade business ethics. These guys have not even been approved by any country. That is their country. Only a few spokesmen have actually approved these people. And these United Nations people are there in New York City, you understand, making decisions for your future. and you don't know anything about this. And then they plug it in your country, your people here, your politicians, go ahead and approve it. They probably have not even read the stuff, you see? Same thing with Homeland Defense deal. They never signed, never even read the information. But they voted for it. Why didn't you just vote against it if you didn't know what was in it? Clown. But these people are all looking out for themselves. Social equity and free trade business ethics, you see. Mental health and violent crime. Human settlements. Economic freedom for migrants, you see. Diversity, education. Diversity, yes. Education, all right. Diversity, yes, yes. World peace and justice. The Peace Palace, that is in Hague, Netherlands. The Criminal Court of Rome, that is in Italy. And the Sanhedrin Court is in Jerusalem and the United States. 2. The European Union and mid-level 3 trade councils adopt regional plans and legislation to enforce UN resolutions on members. Courts. European Court of Justice, the World Trade Organization, and the regional councils, and the proposed Andrea Court. 3. National legislation in member nations adopt local laws and programs to enforce mandates adopted by UN. That's right, you heard that. National legislatures in member nations adopt local laws and programs to enforce mandates adopted by the UN. Courts, U.S. Supreme Court, state Supreme Courts, county Supreme Courts, municipal courts, hearing and review boards, regional councils, appointed citizen councils, and the community development agencies. Section 8, International Policy Studies. The Waikato, I'll spell this, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm just going to spell it to you. W-A-I-K-A-T-O Management School, which is located in New Zealand. The Hague Institute for International Studies, that's in Netherlands. The Police Academy of Czech Republic, that's in Czech Republic. University of Essex, E-S-S-E-X, that's in United Kingdom. The Center of Excellence, that's in the United Kingdom. University of the Andes, that's in San Cristobal in Venezuela. Florida International University is a major player in this, folks. That's in Florida. Center for Strategic, that is the CSIS, is in Washington, D.C. The Institute for Communitarian Policy Studies is in Washington. Institute for International Economics, Washington, D.C. George Washington University, naturally, at Washington, D.C. New York University, New York. And New York University John Monet School for International Law. Seminars are actually in New York, and also in Miami, Florida. The Furman Center for Real Estate and Urban Policy, the Community Development Law and Property Theory. This seminar taught by Professor Wyman, W-Y-M-A-N, examines contemporary debates about property using a range of legal, historical, or philosophical materials. The seminar begins by considering 4 theoretical approaches to Lockean case for property, contemporary rights-based theories of property, and communitarian perspectives. The seminar applies these approaches to live controversies in areas such as environmental and intellectual property laws, drawing on the 4 theoretical perspectives. The seminar then addresses a range of topics, including property rights and markets, social norms, takings, and reparations. Association of American Law School Training Center, Association of American Law School Teaching Conference, presentation called Communities of Interest, Private Land Use Control and Private Communities, a Communitarian Perspective. See, they're changing laws, folks, that you're not going to be able to own private land. That's what they're doing. The Washington State Community Association Initiative. This is a presentation on community associates and related topics by Jimmy Winokur, W-I-N-O-K-U-R, includes servitude regimes and communitarian perspective. Say that again. Includes servitude regimes and communitarian perspective. Community association that's settings for postmodern communities. So this is, you see what they're doing. Then this Big Mother Double Tongue Dictionary. This is what she came up with. Abandoned means prime, private, undeveloped property coveted by communitarians and local public-private partnerships. Can also be used to describe the owners. Abatement a communitarian concept that expands U.S. eminent domain laws to include using a more moral reason for assuming the public has a responsibility to control all private land for the future. You hear that? Especially used to attain valuable property not for sale. Anthropology, 18th century imperial British science based on Darwin's theory of evolution. Sponsored by Albert Gallatin, Gallatin in the U.S. to prove the American Indians were an inferior culture. Today is a legitimate the science of man, a form of sociology used to study and catalog undeveloped people's assets. Armies of Compassion, United Nations forces in Katanga, Africa in December 1962. As the Red Cross explained, soldiers moved into the hospital after being fired on from the building and machine gun patients in the bed. By the way, folks, this whole thing that took place in Katanga was that the UN actually killed people in that area. That's right. They killed people. They were supposed to protect people, and they actually killed them. I'll have to find out the information for you, but that's what happened. Assets-based community development, logging everyone's individual skills and abilities in a master database to be mapped, categorized, analysis, and utilized by government and private business achieving sustainable growth in American community. Don't give them your information, folks. Don't tell them anything you're what you do. None of their damn business. Assets means individual skills, abilities, attributes, and capacity. See, there's putting you in a database, and they're going to find out what you can do, what you can't do. They'll put you in you'll have a job, yes, right. Yeah, but you won't be doing, you'll be doing something that basically won't pay anything, you see. The World Bank uses the term hidden human assets to describe underutilized skills and abilities. I don't believe that, folks. That's what they say. Bill of Rights, outdated nationalist document, a barrier to global justice. Bullshit. Capacity, the sum total of everyone in the community's life skills, as in the citizens' overall capacity level for enticing businesses to build inside collectives. Change agent. This is facilitators, educators who study manipulative techniques such as Gestalt, Gestalt, Delphi, and etc., used to contrive and dominate private public meetings, a specialized elite workforce designed by Marxists to promote civil unrest and destroy free countries. Civil servant, a more moral government agent in charge of enforcing communitarian regulations, often confused with legitimate public employees. Folks, what's happening now? They're teaching different laws in the universities too. They're no longer teaching constitutional law. They're teaching communitarian law. So as this time goes on, these will become lawyers, and they will begin to push these on other people. You think it's bad now? Civil society, the utopian dream of a futuristic society where everyone is good and nobody's allowed to be bad. Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, it's synonymous to communitarianism in the third way. Collective guilt, psychological weapons created by Carl Jung, the same globalist cartel. Here again, say this again. I'm going to say this very clearly, folks. Collective guilt, psychological weapons created by Carl Jung, the same globalist cartel that funded the Nazis, used on German people to feel guilt for the crimes against humanity committed by the National Socialists in their genocidal mania against humanity. Tests successfully on Germany after the experiment failure of state-controlled eugenics. Eugenic Congress supplied the evidence for Aryan superiority to Hitler in 1930. So you see, folks, those of you that praise this guy named Carl Jung, he's not what he appears to be. He doesn't, folks. You always think he's a good guy. There aren't any good guys, folks. Not in the government. Not anyway. And when they put people on pedestals, folks, that's the red flag. That's the red flag. Communitarian, that is one who cloaks fascist tendencies behind an obscure philosophy. Community assets, World Bank term for the total worth of human resources owned by banking institutions and global collectives. Community council, originally used by Americans to define the legitimate local government bodies used more often in the 21st century to describe small groups of entitled citizens who oversee and enforce sustainable development plans. Community government, unelected, appointed members of newly formed community councils and committee designed to change American laws under the Bill of Rights by balancing U.S. individual rights against the rights of the community. Community 2020 mapping software, housing and urban development, data gathering, and geographically information, GIS, database distributed to particular community governments in the United States. Community police or community-oriented police service, that is the COPS. Special police trained by U.S. military special forces, that is the Mosaic and the KGB, used to gather and disseminate massive amount of private data, also used to monitor behavior, mediate between people over noise disputes, and perform job and lifestyle-related interventions. Next one, community mapping, planning analysis for safety strategies, COMPAS that is. Mapping programs designed by COPS to gather data on the American people into one central international database. You see, they're going to find out everything they want about you. That's why you don't volunteer to tell anything about anybody about what you do. And I wonder if that's what Facebook does too. Compassionate service, that is government mandated volunteerism. Consensus building, the opposite of logical, open, and democratic debate, that's correct, used by committees and councils to control the free exchange of information and opinions. Part of every communitarian decision-making process, you see. Conspiracy theory, the British imperialist theory used to discount factual and reasonable objections to one world councils and despots' law and programs. Constitution, legal contract between people in free societies, a format for hiring government servants now only mentioned by nationalists and crazy people in radical freedom fighter militias. Constitutionalists, wackos who cite the U.S. Constitution or any state constitution. Crime, formerly fairly straight up acts by a human against civilized society, that is murder, rape, assault, robbery, embezzlement, can now be used to describe thoughts or problems that might someday lead to crime. Yeah, I remember that movie. I can't think of it. They can already predict what you would do, supposedly. Crime mapping, a highly specialized new law enforcement tool that takes data gathered into GIS and use it to predict or prevent crime. How do they know that, folks? Because they don't. It's just an excuse for them to be able to have more control. Crime Mapping Research Center, created in 1997 by the Department of Justice under the National Institute for Justice. They research ways to gather and disseminate information about local crime and problems. Crime prevention, the theory that if the community has enough information and data on everyone living in the collective, then the cops can identify and stop the bad people from committing crimes against the community. A program Big Mother insists could stop people from even thinking about committing crimes. Crime problems, the unscientific principle that older neighborhoods and poor people living conditions such as dark streets, junky cars, lots of visitors, yelling, loud laughter, cheap barbecues, and unscaped yards all somehow contributed to crime. Defense Advancement Research, which is called DARPA. This is a Scottish Rite of Freemasonry branch of the U.S. military. Did you know that? An ancient snoop organization that gone high-tech, now part of the partnership between the world's oil corporations and high-level communitarian officials and advisors in the White House. Also part of the Total Information Awareness, TIA program. Their logo is a pyramid with an all-seeing eye that illuminates a globe, and the Latin script reads, "Knowledge is power." Next one, deceit. A accepted format for dealing with commoners. Native Americans call it speaking with a forked tongue. Decision-making. The process community government uses to implement laws that would eliminate the U.S. Bill of Rights. Dialectic. A 19th century twisted logic developed by Hegel and borrowed by Marx. Type of reasoning that eliminates reasoning and free will away to a communitarian synthesis. Earth Charter, United Nations document declaring the fundamental principle for a sustainable future and an urgent call to build a global partnership for sustainable development. Signed by the U.S. Conference of Mayors in 2001. The whereas of the bill includes care for the community of life with compassion, understanding, and love. So you had mayors that actually signed this stuff. You see. That would be nice to know who your local mayor, what he did. Economic justice. Marx's theory of redistributing of wealth to ensure global access to middle-class, affluent lifestyles. Americans are supposedly responsible for poverty worldwide based on our greedy consumption of more than our share of resources. Wow. It's all about attacking our country, folks, and our freedoms. It has nothing to do with that, you see. It's just another excuse. Economic security, global government control of production and trade rather than the worn-out idea of protecting national political economy controlling instead of protecting individual business. Eugenics, 19th century British imperial science of genocide. providing the scientific basis for population control and the murder of billions of people. Faith-based government, here's the one that W did. Faith-based government partnership in religious programs, the exact opposite of separation of church and state. That's correct. It may include eco-terrorists and big mother religions, you see. That's George W. And people, the church is completely blind to that. But then they're blind themselves, aren't they? Fear. National emotional response to violent criminal acts and perceived threats against one person, family, or property, used by communitarians to justify their resistance, you see. Feminism. A modern ideology that inequality between the sexes is the fault of historical patriarchal Muslims and Christian religion followers, used in the early stages to reform inequality in American law. Its primary success has been to trick women into supporting egalitarian social science and eugenics campaigns such as Planned Parenthood. Full-blown fear. Phrase coined by communitarian thinker George Kelling, Kelling, in his book, The Broken Window Theory. He used to describe what happens when people feel like nobody cares and nobody's in charge. Gang stalking. Hired thugs following and intimidating people. Geographic Information Services. GIS, one of the layers in the map. In Seattle, the GIS is owned and operated by the Seattle Public Utilities, used primarily for mapping cables, electrical lines, water lines, and sewer and garbage. General welfare. Supposedly, the fundamental purpose of government is laid out by the founding fathers. Now expanded to include much more than a government of free states, charged with providing the infrastructure to promote trade between the states. Growth management. Based for all its sustainable ideology, sold to Americans over the past 30 years as a way to limit the ugly strip mall sprawl that went on through the last half of the 20th century. After federal agencies began directing local land use laws, including all the socialist partnership concepts laid out by the United Nations. Habitat or habitability. A detailed summary of every living organism in an area. That's what they do. This is money that's wasted, folks. Harboring or hoarding syndrome, that is unproven, unsubstantiated mental illness, created in the last 20 years to use to identify bizarre behaviors not allowed by the NOW, used to gain access to private homes and justify interventions on people diagnosed with the illness. Hidden assets, the underutilized skills and abilities of humanity. Housing and urban development, designer of the worst public housing projects in the country, originated of a subsequent cleanup efforts. HUD has a master database of all residents in public housing. Their data files are vast in detail. HUD designed the data software for asset-based community developments and was a presenter to the United Nations Habitat II Conference on Human Settlements in 1996, the gateway agency for numerous community-oriented policing service programs. Human capital, our buying power under sustainable development. Human resources, our new destination under sustainable development. See, these words are buzzwords, folks. They're saying these words already. Human settlements, planned communities, public HUD housing, detainable centers, refugees camps, etc. Human subject research, study and interviews performed by government councils and social science to assist the government with decisions about funding, policymaking, and new programs. Very strictly controlled data until Compass came along. Individual assets, our skills and abilities, categorized by best use by the collective. Innovative, new ideas that circumvent restriction places on government bodies. Innovative enforcement strategies, creating new laws that eliminate the Bill of Rights. Initiative, vehicle for New World Order programs. It is a genuine people's initiative, then of course it's a bad thing. Interagency working group, that is a government organization that includes as many branches of unelected government officials or agencies as possible, used to design innovative communitarian laws that promote social equity. Do you realize that people are doing this because a lot of them are doing it because they want to make money in government jobs? You realize that? And they're actually hurting their own fellow human beings. Interdepartmental cross-training, that is a training process in which all government agencies with access to private homes must log private information on individuals into a GIS database. Intervention, interference in private lives using community police to help alcoholics, addicts, and the mentally ill, tested by cops in alcoholic impact areas. Involuntary human resettlements, that is the World Bank programs used throughout the countries in Africa and the Middle East, most recently used in Mexico and Central America to help farmers and tribal people who are losing land to sustainable development. Asset-based interviews are key to managing all the human capacity under new law training programs. Involuntary resettlements offer many opportunities to train tribal people to learn service jobs so they can wait on elite eco tourists, you see. Knock and talks, information interviews conducted by community policing, logged into a GIS database and used to prevent crime based on individual private data. Land use, development land according to sustainable development. Land trust, process by which a community buys and controls private property. Lie, the opposite of true. Livability, undefined communitarian concepts of utopian living standards used wherever possible in the process of implementing sustainable development principles. Yeah, you see these pack type of things going on in California and all these major cities. They're going to boot you out of your regular houses, folks, and they're going to put you in those things. Welcome to the new America. Let's continue. Local Agenda 21, Blueprint for Rebuilding Sustainable Communities Around the World, introduced at the UN Earth Summit Summer Conference in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Mental illness, the horrible affliction of individualistic thinking, often found in children of all socioeconomic backgrounds and genetic dispositions. They're scoping out your children here, folks, too. Multiple agency partnership, that is the communitarian government terms. Nationalism, self-government as in the ideology of liberty used to foment unrest and bring on the American Revolution. Natural law, fundamental principles of American belief in the law of a just creator, idea that all people are created equal. Natural science, fundamental principles of, you notice that natural law is that all people are created equal, but not according to these people. No, they don't see it that way. They've been brainwashed. They're the managers, you see. These are the managers. These are the do-gooders that basically are going to destroy everything and are doing it already. Fundamental principles of British imperialism, claiming the only thinkers Americans are allowed to believe are British scientists working for a globalist. Neighborhood development, rebuilding America into something between HUD housing and communist collectives, that is the third way. Neighborhood planning, the consensus process used to create new collectives. The NWO, the New World Order, elites promoting the agenda to ensure sustainable laws prevail over national laws. National Incident-Based Reporting System, a project that grants permission for the Department of Justice to move beyond aggregate statistics and raw counts of crimes and arrests. Privacy, a threat to world security, only mentioned by bad people with something to hide. Really, see how they narrow this whole thing? Private farms, ancient American term used prior to the 2000s, used to define privately owned farms. In modern times, balancing into oblivion by corporate environmental collectives. Private property, formerly a right protected by the U.S. Bill of Rights, now a privilege granted only to communitarian citizens under strict scientific and government control. Problem-oriented policing, that's POP, idea that poor economic conditions can be blamed on problems of poor people, ideas that poor people scare away shoppers in a civil society. Any problems that lead people to feel full-blown fear should be heavily monitored and removed from the area. See weed and seed. Problem-solving partnerships, the process of identifying problem neighbors who may or may not be a barrier to a sustainable collective, most often targeted property owners. Public-private partnership, a private and public cooperative government-controlled development organization used in countries living under governments who direct enterprise, also known as a corporate fascism. Perfectly under this was Mussolini of Italy. Quality of life, a higher standard of living defined by collectivists. If you look under that livability, you'd be put in a stack and pack type of deal. Redistribution, idea that everybody should share, taught to American children as early as preschool and kindergarten. Reinventing government, changing the United States government from a republic into a communist collective, or something even more modern. Rejuvenation, tearing down old neighborhoods on prime city real estate and building communitarian collectives in their place. Rebuilding communities, the theory that the world must be torn down and rebuilt. Wow. Taken from the socialist imperative to rebuild the world, the actual rebuilding is the process by which sustainable developments change local government to include community councils who will pass and enforce laws to achieve sustainability. the fundamental purpose of United Nations Local Agenda 21. RFID, the radio frequency identification, new technology used anywhere in human skin, clothing, purchased goods, in pets, livestock, send a radio frequency signal to the operator with a location for the subject being tracked. The amount of information on the chip can hold varies, but all of them can be uploaded from a distance, some by satellite. There's a very real possibility that it can be implanted as part of a vaccination immunization, also part of the National Animal Identification System and the National ID. Scanning and analyzing response and assessment. This is Sarah. The communitarian-based weed and seed GIS format to finding and identify problem people in the community. Initially targeting persons in low-income areas being slated for major urban redevelopment projects. Moved into middle-class American police stations in the late 1990s. Eventually, the required format to be used by every Seattle Police Precinct affiliated department. Scientific theory, the art of distorting information using smoke and mirrors, fancy credentials, and twisted logic to make up for the lack of sound science, mainly satisfying modern journalists who might ask one or two dumb questions. Information is listed under sustainable grants, basic for the extermination of people worldwide. Scientists, New Age priests, gurus, legal or spiritual advisor. Security, government blanket term to do anything it wants, used frequently to justify draconian measures against freedom. Social equity, distribution of wealth and opportunity fairly. In other words, taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots. Social sciences, a god or similar divine entity, capable of mystical foresight. Smart growth, seed growth management. Speak out, sustainable development presentations with overwhelming scientific reports and maps identifying a dangerous system, that is, endangered species, that is, wetland, watershed, gold, oil, or other commodity in a community that must now be protected and developed sustainably. Stewardship, the basic tenet of British conservatism, the idea that private corporations and rich foreigners know best how to protect land that has been rightfully stolen. Stakeholders, select businesses, community organizations, and individuals who contribute to writing local Agenda 21 plans at the community level. Station area planning, a communist idea that the government should directly control and manage all land falling within a 1-mile radius of a proposed transit station. Stealing people's land. Strategy of enforcement, combining military principles for prolonged battles with local crime prevention programs. The perfectly unreasonable objective of no victory ever. Sustainability, United Nations term used to implement world government authority over all human resources, environmental resources, and production and trade, used to describe a higher standard of equity living and commerce. Synthesis, communitarianism is the final solution to the Hegelian dialectic. The third way, American political platform favored by George Bush Jr. and Bill Clinton, Fabian socialist term championed by Tony Blair, implies a solution to conflicting ideology of far right and far left called the radical middle. Transit-related developments, that is part of the communitarian world vision for creating pedestrian corridors around useless trains that only go to shopping malls. I think they mean cars, I guess. I don't know trains, useless trains. Anyway, traitor, one who believes in truth enough to confront lies. Wow, they switched it all the way around. It's double talk, double speak. Treason, defending individual against imperialist laws. Truth means lie to them. Urban blight, 1960 concept defining poor neighborhoods as open sewers. Urban planning, a vast network of lawyers and architects who control all Americans' private land and resources in urban centers. Wow. Urban renewal, the communitarian answer to urban blight. Validation event, an invitation to a small community meeting in which locals agree to implement local Agenda 21 plans. Vision, international socialist term to describe a utopian future. So these words are all what I call, they don't say anything, they're just kind of a generalized word. See, they fool you. You think something about vision, and they're thinking something else. Visioning, process whereby the collective government implements itself. Weed and seed, this is a HUD program using noisy neighbors and innovative strategies of community policing enforcement to pull bad weeds and plant good seeds. And the last one here is willing seller, a willing seller, a property owner forced to donate, sell, or abandon their property. Sorry, getting late here, folks. Yes, a little after 12 o'clock. So anyway, that's the conclusion of the book by anti-communitarian author Nikki Raapana. This is like the Bible, folks. You really need to listen to what I'm sharing with you. I don't know if anybody's even sharing this information out there on YouTube, or they're all fighting. They're talking about other things that are just kind of nonsense deal here. This is the main objective of what they're doing to us, you see. And it's important for you to really look into this and understand what is going on. And your kids or your future children, whatever, are going to hate you if you don't stand. And I don't mean that basically to scare you, but frankly, folks, you're going to have to do something. We're all going to have to do something, because right now we're in a fucking mess. And all these things around us, see, you got to understand all these things going on all around this other stuff they're talking about. Yes, they're important, but what's going on right now is what they're implementing their plan. You see, all that's to basically steer you over here, steer you over there. The thing in Ukraine, Russia, America, whatever, is to steer you another way, to never actually look at what's going on in your own country being destroyed within. So I'm going to say thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Again, I'm doing this out of the trying to help people to understand what is the real battle. You can talk all day about George Orwell, talk about Huxley, but right now, folks, that's not important anymore. We know that these guys were bad men. And that might be a nice foundation, so to speak, but the reality here is this particular book here by Nikki Raapana. So again, the Communitarian Buzzwords. I'll be on Facebook, again, YouTube, Discerning What Is True, and Odyssey. Thank you for being here, and I wish you a good night. Take care.